Palestinians, including many who are starving, are facing an increasing wave of attacks by Israeli forces. Airstrikes have killed at least 125 people since early morning on Sunday. Hospital officials say one strike hit a camp sheltering displaced people in al-Mawasi. 36 people killed there. Israel had designated the area in southern Gaza to be a safe zone. Well, in the north, Israeli forces bombed a house in Beit Lahia, killing 7 members of one family. Dozens have died in strikes in Gaza City. The bombardment comes as the Israeli military launched a new ground assault on the Strip. Medical officials say the Israeli ban on deliveries of food, medicine and fuel is leading to unnecessary deaths. And the UN is warning of imminent famine now. Daniel Levy is a Middle East analyst and the president of the US Middle East Project. He joins us live from London now. Good to have you with us. So, Daniel, let's start with this announcement of an intensified Israeli operation, which they're calling Gideons Chariot. What is the goal of Gideons Chariot?
Sammy, we have to spell it out. But do we really need to? Because it has been repeated by Israeli leadership itself so many times to use starvation, to make Gaza unlivable, to ethnically cleanse Gaza. So this time they call it Gideon's Chariot. They are intensifying. There may be some claim that this might tip negotiations. But what they're telling us also is even if there is a pause, this is what they will return to. There are questions inside Israel, Sammy. Will they have the reservists? Will they carry the public with them? But while I offer this analysis, Sammy, I'm also a human being watching the same images as your viewers, seeing what we see, listening to those reports, the attacks again on hospitals, medical workers, the starvation, 100+ killings a day. And I'm sure, like your viewers, I look at this and I ask myself, where is humanity? Where is leadership? Is this a post-shame world? And how do we not slip into anger and rage that cannot be channeled? And I just want to say to you, Sammy, that we can ask these questions, but we know the answers. Israel has been clear what it's doing. And this has been documented in real time by medical workers, by your journalists. The books have been written. The speeches have been given. And so this disconnect between what we know and what is being done, I think that's the question we have to address. Because eventually, and the timelines don't stack up between the destruction and getting this to stop. But what more can be done? What more protest? What more holding leaders accountable, hounding leaders when they're still willing to export arms to Israel? Will dock workers load those arms? Will sports teams participate with Israel? And will some of those deals inked, let's be honest, for investment and trade and arms purchases be used as leverage with the US to condition this on what the US does, because the US can stop this. Trump has come and gone.
On that point, Daniel, on that point, there is some talk, I'm sure you've heard it, Donald Trump's been talking a little bit about getting things resolved in one way or another in Gaza. Is a ceasefire or some kind of deal in the making? We should point out, of course, that there was a deal. Israel violated it and dragged Gaza back into this. Is there another American push that's coming for some kind of resolution? Would it make a difference? Would Israel listen? Would Israel violate it again?
Look, everything makes a difference when you see the circumstances Palestinians in Gaza are living in. And let's be clear, the Israeli government has also stated its intention to extend this to the West Bank. So let's just acknowledge that. So yes. So I hope you can hear me. Israel has made clear that...
Yeah, we can hear you, Daniel.
Great. Israel has made clear that it intends to extend this into the West Bank. And with this extent of depravity and violence being visited upon people, every bit makes a difference. But it's an important question, Sammy, because we also seem to be in a moment where there is a disconnect between the idea of a temporary pause and actually preventing this. And if you want to ask about the negotiations and is there an American plan, the president has just come back from the region, President Trump, and he has continued to talk about zones that will be American-owned. He calls them freedom zones. He means free of Palestinians, it seems. So that's still the narrative. And there is a disconnect between getting some kind of hiatus, which would get some of the Israeli hostages out, the worthy goal, and actually getting an end to Israel's genocide, because Israel is saying, yes, we'll stop for a few weeks and then we'll carry on. And the only way you change that equation is if Prime Minister Netanyahu, next time he goes out to test the water, he puts his finger in the air and says, is the impunity still in place? Because every time Israel's doubling down on their actions, that's what he does. He takes impunity for a test ride. And if he sees that the results come back, yup, impunity is still in place. Maybe there's some rhetoric. Maybe the Arab League summit says this or that. But in practice, Israel can still get away with it. That's what has to change.
So, Daniel, listening to what you're saying, is the goal here, any talk of a ceasefire is just a temporary measure. But does Israel think it can even get to another temporary pause by imposing its will, its conditions through sheer military force and through these mass killings we're seeing of civilians, that it will break the will of Hamas to say, OK, we'll agree to a temporary pause on your terms, we'll release the captives, just give us a break and then go back to killing us?
I don't think that's the conclusion they have reached. I think that is part of the language of distraction and duplicity and double talk, just like this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. One day those people should also face reckoning for their complicity in these war crimes. I think all of this is a distraction because they want to make sure that the impunity stays in place. And they know that what will change this equation isn't what more horrors they can visit upon the Palestinian population, but what may eventually change this equation is whether they are shown the stop sign. And that stop sign runs through Washington, but it doesn't just run through Washington. It runs through what every person does in terms of not falling into desperation and hopelessness, but in trying to change that equation. Washington is not the only actor. Washington doesn't operate in a vacuum. We can't just have words. And so if the Israelis see that shifts, and that's the problem, Sam, then they will change. Because what the Israelis see, and what we all see, is there are two tracks working in parallel. One is going very fast. It's the track of the destruction, the starvation, the genocide. The other track is painfully slow, which is the track that, one day in history we'll know what happened. The situation of the Palestinians will change. Israel will be held accountable eventually. Right. That is no solace today. And that track needs to be accelerated. It's painfully difficult. I don't want to be Pollyannic, but it has to happen.
Thank you so much. Daniel Levy there, our Middle East analyst.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.